And good evening, everyone. We are live on the University of Denver campus. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Ann Trujillo, and Denver7, the Denver Post, and the Center on American Politics at the University of Denver are partnering tonight to bring you this very special debate. It's the final set of debates before next Tuesday's primary election here in Colorado. And tonight we are focused on the Democrats. And I am moderating tonight alongside Denver Post political reporter John Frank.
It's great to be here. Looking forward to this.
Definitely. All right, before we begin, let's introduce the candidates. Mike Johnston, a state senator with a background in education.
Love the state, have grown up here, and feel like we have the chance to continue to lead the country. I think I have had the chance to serve in the legislature the last 7 years and found there are a lot of big problems we've been able to take on and help solve together, but there are a lot of big problems I think still facing COD over the next decade.
Cary Kennedy, a woman who's managed taxpayer dollars at the state and local level.
People really look to Colorado as an innovative, forward-looking, modern state. So it's been a real pleasure for me to be a part of the leadership that has helped bring that progress here to Colorado.
Donna Lynne, the healthcare executive who currently serves as lieutenant governor.
It is a complicated state, and it's intricate. And every day I'm on the front line of making decisions, of driving change, and I think that is a prerequisite for being able to do this job.
Jared Polis, a U.S. representative from Boulder and self-made millionaire.
I spend a lot of time hearing concerns from constituents, trying to address them, working with them on their veterans benefits, on immigration issues, really roll up our sleeves. Let's get to work on stuff.
First, the rules for tonight's debate. The order the candidates will answer the questions was predetermined by a random draw. The candidates will have 60 seconds to answer each question and 30 seconds for a rebuttal when needed and determined by the moderators. All of the candidates have asked that we call them by their first names tonight. We have asked our audience here at DU to remain silent for the duration of the debate, holding all applause until the end. Ann has our first question.
All right, and we begin with immigration. It is now Trump administration policy to separate some young children from their families if they illegally cross the U.S.-Mexican border. Today, Governor Hickenlooper signed an executive order to ban state agencies from supporting such separation if the only violation is related to immigration. As governor, what will be your policy toward those immigrants, and how will you respond if we lose federal money over immigration policy? And Jared Polis, you're first.
You know, as a father, I look in absolute horror at when under orders from the Trump administration, our own government is removing 1-year-old, 2-year-old kids from their loving parents who are trying to escape their home countries to make a new life in our country, just as my great-grandparents did. I am glad that Governor Hickenlooper took an important step and said that no state resources would be used to separate families. And that stands in stark contrast to Republican frontrunner Walker Stapleton, who said that he would send the Colorado National Guard to the border to actually enforce Trump's orders. I think it's important as governor that we set an inclusive tone for the state. I founded a school that's helped serve new immigrants across the metropolitan area. I was an original sponsor of comprehensive immigration reform in the House of Representatives. You know, as governor, I'll make sure that Colorado doesn't stand idly by and allow these acts of terror to be committed in our name, separating 1- and 2-year-old kids from their loving parents.
And I think the question was, what will be your policy toward those immigrants, and how will you respond if we lose federal money over immigration policy?
We should be a welcoming state for immigrants, and we're not going to let our how we address newcomers to Colorado be set by Donald Trump's policies out of Washington. As governor, I'll stand against Donald Trump, as I have in Congress, as I will in governor, to make sure they're a welcoming state for new arrivals and for those of us already here.
Ms. Lynne, the same question?
Great, thank you. I think the word reprehensible probably is even too mild to describe what's going on. I spent my morning with the governor and his team working on this executive order, as well as the press response, and actually meeting with some folks who had gathered in the Capitol. I think we've got to also talk about DACA, and these things, as you know, are being linked. And I would fight that fight. And when it comes to losing federal money, I'm willing to take that risk. This is tearing apart families. I'm a single mother. I had a tough time in my life raising children. I can only imagine for people who are trying to seek asylum, who are trying to do the right thing for their families, how hard this will do. And I will stand with them on this and other issues as we go forward.
Cary, same question to you. What would your policy be?
John, we can't tolerate the violation of human and civil rights. What we're seeing the Trump administration do on the border today, where they are removing children from their parents, it violates basic human decency. We are better than that. You will see me as governor oppose any policies that tear families apart. You will see me defend the legal rights of immigrants, including our DACA students who are here. I'm married to an immigrant. My husband came to this country when he was 7 years old. We need to stand up and not just defend the legal rights of immigrants, but recognize and value the tremendous accomplishments and contributions that they make in our communities every single day. You will see me fight the Trump administration policies that are tearing families apart and, quite frankly, making our communities less safe. Local law enforcement shouldn't have anything to do with enforcing federal immigration policy.
Mike Johnston.
Thank you. I mean, I think the tragedy of yesterday for all of us is for those of us who got to spend yesterday as Father's Day, the best part of the day other than the scrawled little cards is the moment when you get all three of your kids to pile up in your lap and you sit down on the couch and you get to just be with them. Then you think about what it'd be like in that moment to have an armed guard wearing our flag on your shoulder come and rip one of those kids out of your arms. You think about how your world would collapse in that moment, the way that the Honduran man who committed suicide over it, his world collapsed. This is why elections matter. And this is why this race is so critical, because we're going to need someone who has the courage and the clarity to stand up in moments. And here the question is not if we're going to restore Americans' greatness, it's if we're going to defend America's fundamental goodness. And so that is why I got into politics in the first place, because I had students who were undocumented who were trying to get access to college, and I was fighting for them to get in-state tuition. I helped sponsor driver's licenses, and that's why I have said I will not, as governor, allow Colorado to be the hands to implement the wishes of Donald Trump's cold heart. So we will not use state resources to detain them, to transport them, or to deport them.
Real quickly, Donna, would you declare Colorado a sanctuary state?
You know, we've looked at this issue, and we don't even know what the definition of sanctuary state is. It's a nuance that I think many people have, but I think defending the rights of the immigrants who live here, making sure, as we did today, that there are no state resources allocated to this are important things. I think sanctuary state is a amorphous term that we've got to come to grapple with.
So that sounds like a no, then?
I think it's a no because we don't know what it means, but certainly the theory behind defending the rights of people who are here is absolutely something that I agree with.
Same question to you, Cary. Would you declare Colorado a sanctuary state?
Yeah, again, nobody's defined that term, so without a definition, the answer is no. But we absolutely have to make sure that immigrants who are living in our community are part of our community, and they can go to local officials, local law enforcement, the local courthouse, they can take their kids to school, they can take their kids to the library, they can go pick up their paycheck without fear of deportation. We need to make sure that our communities are safe, and safe for everyone to call the police, report child abuse, report domestic violence. We want immigrants to feel safe in their communities, and that's the way we're going to keep this state safe from fear and safe from the kind of intimidation that we see coming out of the Trump White House.
Mike.
Thank you.
So I can't answer this. We do know what a sanctuary state is. The question is what we believe the state should or shouldn't do to share information with ICE. And I met with Adisela this week, who's one of the women who is seeking sanctuary right now in Park Hill. And I think the answer on this is what we ought not to do is share information anytime someone gets a busted taillight or a traffic ticket or any of the regular everyday occurrences that any of us could get on the way to take our kids to school or to the public library. There's no reason for the state to share that information with ICE, and I would not do it. In the small number of circumstances where you have someone that has committed murder or who has committed violent sexual assault, there is then a federal question about who charges that person, where their sentence is served, what action is taken. I think even people seeking sanctuary would say in those real public health and safety situations, it's appropriate to share. We ought never to do it in the everyday events that all the rest of us go through.
So real quickly, you would not you would have state employees not cooperate with federal immigration authorities?
I would not, and sheriffs support this idea. On the question of sharing information from local traffic stops or local enforcement, I would not share that information with ICE, and local sheriffs, if you talk to them all around the state, don't want to do it either. It's a waste of their time, it's a waste of their resources, and it's a waste of their personnel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jared?
I will not let Donald Trump commandeer our local law enforcement to enforce a broken immigration law that divides families and hurts our country and makes us weaker. And we don't need to call ourselves or be a sanctuary anything to do that. It's the law today. Republican and Democratic sheriffs agree that it makes our communities more dangerous and increases crime if we let Donald Trump and Washington bureaucrats take control of our local law enforcement and tell them what to do.
Last week's road rage shooting in Westminster once again raises questions about mental health and guns. And it can leave some people feeling like there's nothing helping the situation right now. What would you do differently to address situations like this? And Cary, we'll start with you.
Yeah, we're all heartbroken for that poor family in Westminster, and we have seen too many incidences of gun violence in our state and our nation that are taking innocent lives. Too often, it's our children who are the victims. In the incident in Westminster, I think Colorado should have had a red flag law, a law that would have alerted the authorities when someone is losing control and is a threat, is a risk to the safety and the health of others, someone who has serious mental illness, their firearms should be able to be removed, and the background check when we sell people firearms also needs to include a mental health component. So I grew up with 3 brothers and sisters who joined my family through the foster care system, and my brothers and sisters had been victims of violence, and a couple of them were involved in the criminal justice system. And my family had to take action to prevent someone who we cared about because they became a threat. And we needed help. You have to be able to call the authorities and get help. We don't know all of the circumstances yet about the shooting in Westminster, but too often we see folks who commit these heinous crimes, have lost control, haven't been able to get the mental health treatment that they need.
Thank you.
And the authorities haven't been able to intervene.
Thank you. Mike.
Thank you. I'm proud that I'm the only one here who has actually taken on the NRA twice and won twice. I served in the state Senate and I helped pass both the background checks, universal background checks, as well as the high capacity magazine ban. I'm also the only one that's a gun owner and have owned guns my whole life. And so I think we agree on this question of getting red flag laws passed. The question is, who's going to show the kind of leadership to actually get this done? So rather than just sitting and wringing our hands on why we can't get it done, I took a different approach, which is I found the next quarterly meeting of the NRA up in Frisco, and I drove up there and I walked in the front door. And I started talking to NRA members about red flag laws and why, as a gun owner myself, I thought this is something we could get done. And after talking to 3 or 4 of them, they all said, you know what, this is actually a reasonable proposal. I could support this. It turns out you actually get much farther by talking to people than by throwing bombs at them. And so I convened a dinner last week where we put together 5 or 6 NRA members. We put together survivors of school shootings. We put together teachers and mental health workers and military veterans. And by the end of that dinner, 100% of the people in that room said they would all work together to make sure we pass red flag laws before next April, which is the 20th anniversary of the Columbine school shooting. That's something I will get done in my first year as governor.
Thank you. Jared?
Look, you know, the problem is not responsible gun owners. It's the gun manufacturing lobby or the NRA. The truth is the vast majority of gun owners support common sense gun safety reforms, support banning bump stocks to convert legal weapons into weapons that resemble the firing rate of illegal automatic weapons, support the Colorado red flag law that I support to put a mental health hold on people that might be a danger, and to make it harder for those who are under a restraining order in domestic abuse cases to access their guns. We need to move forward. As you indicated in the question, though, it's about gun safety, but it's also about mental health. I think we'll soon hopefully have a discussion about health care. I'm proud to support a universal health care model for Colorado to lead the way. Including mental health services has got to be a key piece of that. Of course, it's about safety in all regards. When we're talking about education, it's about making sure that our schools have the counselors we need to make sure that kids who are dealing with trauma or in a difficult situation are able to get the support that they might not have at home or to supplement their support at home to make sure that they're not posing a danger to their fellow students.
Thank you. Donna?
So I've spent most of my life in healthcare and went back to school and got a doctorate in public health, and there is no question what's going on is a public health crisis. And we have to confront it that way. It's not about the gun owners. It is about what is provoking people to do some things that we think are socially not acceptable. And I think the first thing that I would do to answer your question is, as governor, is to declare that what we're experiencing now is in fact a health crisis, much like we have declared the opioid crisis as a health crisis. And part of that is identifying what's the root cause of the problem. What are we seeing here? And we do see more gun ownership in Colorado related to other kinds of incidents like suicides, which is also a crisis in our state. And for me, bringing together primary care and mental health care is one solution. But the first thing is, as the governor did today on the immigration issue, is to call it a crisis and then begin to act.
Thank you. The State Board of Education Thursday considered comprehensive health standards for all students, guidelines for all grade levels to deal with issues like drug use and sex and violence, and one contentious issue came up for fourth graders, suggesting teachers ask students how the use of guns and other weapons can be positive. It did not go anywhere, but since all our candidates, all of you are parents, we want to know what you think would be an appropriate conversation to have with a fourth grader on the topic of guns.
Mike, I think we'll start with you.
Very apt question. I have 2 fourth graders in my home right now, so we have plenty of chances to practice. So I think that I think it's obviously appropriate to talk about gun safety with our kids. We have done that because we have guns in our homes, so it's an important part of our life. I don't think that's something that a school needs to do. As we know right now, if you look around Colorado, we don't mandate the curriculum for local school districts. What we do is set standards and allow schools to meet them. But I think the State Board of Ed is having the wrong conversation about education. The conversation they ought to be having is, what are we going to do to actually make sure we can fund our schools statewide and to make sure we can pay our teachers what they deserve, so we don't have teachers that are making $29,000 a year as a first-year teacher, because we will not be able to keep the talent we need for the most important job in the state if we don't solve this fundamental crisis around school funding. So that is why the most important thing on my agenda is that I will lead the effort to go to the ballot in 2020 and make sure that we can actually repeal the worst parts of Tabor so we can fund our schools as well as our roads and bridges, so we don't see a decade of declining investment in schools, which is the biggest risk our kids face right now.
Jared?
You know, I served 6 years on the State Board of Education. I chaired a board evenly divided between Republicans and Democrats, and part of what I tried to do and by and large accomplished during that tenure was avoid getting into these divisive issues. Of course, the State Board of Ed and no government body should be telling people about the positive or negative features of guns. I trust responsible gun owners. I trust those who don't own guns in their household to tell their kids about safety considerations around gun ownership and safety. Look, we need to do more to make sure that all children in our state are safe. I haven't gotten to the fourth grade level yet. My kids are just 6 and 3. But you know, no parent should have to worry about the unthinkable happening when their kid goes to school. And it's important to have a discussion around how we can make sure that kids can be safe in school, making it harder to access weapons of war, converting legal guns into illegal weapons, and make sure that we have an honest discussion about the mental health resources that are available, particularly for families in need. So I think that this discussion is not one that government should be pushing out a particular propaganda effort to defend guns or attack guns. It's simply one that we should be having on the ground level with real data.
Thank you. Donna?
So I'm in a slightly different place because young people, whether they're fourth graders, fifth graders, or sixth graders or higher, are experiencing gun violence in the schools. They're experiencing gun violence and more focus on it, whether it's through the media or through social media. And I think it's an appropriate conversation to have to relieve some of the anxiety that young people are having. So I'm going to go back to what we're dealing with right now is a mental health crisis. And sometimes the schools are best suited to deal with that. You are more transparent often with a fellow student than you might be with your parents. The parents can exist in a different space. And so as long as we provide schools with the kind of support that they need to have those conversations with mental health counselors, not leave it to the teachers who have enough of a job to do, but it is an important place where we bring together a lot of human services to take care of young people.
Real quickly, Donna, if you believe that we ought to be having this conversation, in one line, real quickly here, what would you tell a fourth grader about gun violence?
I think we tell them that we're trying to make sure that they're safe in our schools. Reassurance is probably the first thing that young people need to feel and have, and also to be able to give them the freedom to talk about, I mean, at 4th grade, they're a little early, but there are still some signs of mental behavior that need to be talked about and acknowledged, and fears and anxiety, and I think it sets a tone for the rest of a young person's development if they don't feel that there's a stigma attached to what they might be thinking.
Cary, same question for you. Would you tell a 4th grader guns are bad?
So my daughter's school, there was a shooting on the street outside last spring. And after the Parkland shooting, she came home and she said to me, "Mom, how did somebody my age buy an AR-15? How did they buy that gun?" So first, with a 4th grader, I would assure their safety, talk to them about the steps that we're taking, that school is a place where they can feel safe every single day. But in order for us to make good on that promise to our 4th graders, we have to ban military-style assault weapons. I tell my children the vast majority of gun owners in our country, in our state, are law-abiding citizens. They use their guns for law-abiding purposes, but there is no place on our streets for these weapons of war that are designed to kill as many people as possible in as short a period of time as possible.
And would you all ban assault weapons? Is that a yes?
That's yes.
Yes.
Very good. We are here at the University of Denver, so let's talk higher education. This next question will be for you, Jared. Colorado ranked the 4th lowest in spending on higher education per student in 2017. Would you support a freeze in college tuition and increase state funding, or what else would you do to help take the tuition burden off of Colorado families?
I'm glad you asked, and I want to take this opportunity to thank DU for hosting this very important debate for voters to make an informed decision. The costs of college are getting out of hand for many families, and it's happening at the same time that for really a degree or some type of certificate or skill above a diploma of high school is more important than ever before to be able to support yourself and your family. And so it's getting harder at the time that it's more important than ever before. I'm very excited about dual and concurrent enrollment programs where kids can earn associate's degrees while they're in high school, even if it means they stay a 5th year in high school at no cost to them. They can graduate with a skill that helps them get a job, or if they go on to a 4-year university and transfer, they only need 2 years to complete. Of course, we need more state funding, particularly targeted at bringing down tuition for in-state students at our public universities. And nationally, I propose replacing this Republican corporate tax giveaway with forgiving student loans and making student college more affordable going forward. It shows our priorities. Education, both preschool through 12th grade, as well as higher education, should truly be our priority in Colorado.
To the question, would you support a tuition freeze?
Well, as you know, the governor, the Board of Regents of CU is independently elected. The governor appoints the Board of Regents at CSU. I would like to see tuitions come down, and that would come out of increased state funding. So if we can work with the legislature to get more funding, I would love to be a governor that can deliver on tuition decreases for the first time in my memory.
Donna, same question.
So I think we have a couple of problems. First of all, we have what we call an attainment gap in Colorado. We don't have enough people who have degrees. But we have, I think, something even more serious, which is an equity gap. We are not educating young people of color, and we need to make sure that we're doing that. We import many of our college graduates from other states. I was part of the Higher Education Funding Task Force, which looked at outcomes and trying to give more money to colleges that had positive outcomes, and I think we need to tweak that so that we're actually looking at performance. On the freeze issue, I think absolutely, if we could freeze tuition for those schools that actually are graduating, particularly more students of color, and they're doing it in a shorter period of time, and they're supporting them, I think that's the way we target the rewards to those universities and link it to careers. Business plays an important role in linking with universities because at the end of the day, you do want people to have jobs.
Thank you for answering the question. Cary?
Yes, I would support freezing tuition for in-state students trying to go to college here in Colorado. We have one of the top economies in the country, and we rank at the bottom in our investment in education. That includes higher education. We are third last nationally in our support for covering the cost of kids attending in-state college, our public colleges and universities. And there's a reason for this, John. It's because for the last 15 years, we've been cutting our investments in education because of our Tabor Amendment. And I will lead as governor to pass permanent reform here in our state so we can adequately and equitably fund our education system. It includes funding higher education. We've cut the state's investment in half in the last 15 years. That's all been pushed onto our students. They just simply can't afford the tuition. So an awful lot of kids growing up in our state aren't going on to higher education, and the ones that aren't finishing because they can't afford the cost.
You talk about removing the cap on Tabor spending. If we were to remove that cap, there is no pot of gold money at the end for the state of Colorado. In fact, we are below the cap right now and are projected to be for the near future. So where would that money actually come from?
Yeah, John, I always say the first rule of holes is if you're in one, stop digging. We're third from the bottom in funding higher education. We rank at the bottom in funding K-12 education. We have one of the most dynamic and innovative and fastest growing economies in the country. I see too often businesses here in our state, when they go to fill their high-skilled, high-paid jobs, they're recruiting from outside of Colorado. I want them recruiting from Pueblo and Trinidad. We need to invest in our education system so that the kids growing up in our state can benefit from the great progress that we're seeing here.
Mike, how would you take the tuition burden off of families?
Let me answer both of the questions. First is, I have supported tuition caps in the past, but here's why they don't solve the problem, which is right now what's happening is you're cutting more and more state resources to schools. And so what they're doing is increasing tuition just to stay even with the total amount of revenue they need to operate because the state's cutting revenue. So if you cut state revenue and you freeze tuition, there's simply not enough dollars to run a university anymore. And so that's why what you have to do is actually reinvest dollars in the state level if you want to match then a tuition freeze. So I would say yes, cap tuition after you've actually put the state support in that we have to allow those schools to grow. But the longer term question is this is more than just how we get students to four-year universities. What we know is that we're in the most rapidly changing economy in American history. And there are going to be industries that disappear overnight, which means you are at age 28 or 38 or 48 going to have to move from one career to the next. And that's going to require new skills. So that's why I would, as governor, put in place the Colorado Promise, which would allow you at any stage of your career to get up to 2 years of skills training or community college debt-free in exchange for providing service to the state. Nothing's free in Colorado, but you got to work for it. If you work for it, there should be opportunity there. And that's what's going to have to be our broader vision of public education as a lifetime investment, because people are going to have to get lots of new skills for new jobs.
You want to put more money toward higher education. Where does it come from?
So thank you. Your second question on the Tabor change, which is I propose going to the ballot in 2020 to repeal the cap on Tabor. That means it would come into effect in 2021. If we continue the economic growth we're seeing at this stage, by that year you will see the state will hit the Tabor cap and it will start generating about $400 million in revenue that would come back to Colorado in year one. I would invest that in both paying our school teachers, putting $100 million into pay school teachers, expanding full-day kindergarten statewide, and closing the preschool gap. I also support that we're going to have to solve a transportation problem with a dedicated resource, which will make sure if transportation is solved separately, you can actually invest these dollars we need most in human infrastructure, which is going to be K-12 and higher ed. I think we know if we don't invest in those two things, our people and our roads and bridges, we're going to see this as a place where businesses don't want to come anymore or don't want to grow.
Thank you. I think we need to get our other two candidates in on this Tabor issue. So, Jared, you first.
Sure. I support structural reform to Tabor. That would include ending the ratchet down effect or allowing revenues above the caps to be utilized. But we can't afford to wait until Tabor reform is done to make the investments we need to make today in providing every child the opportunity to go to preschool and kindergarten, ending decades of underinvestment in our public schools so we can pay teachers better and reduce class size. And making higher education more affordable, as well as building out a 21st century infrastructure to help Colorado succeed, including rural broadband and connectivity. Infrastructure isn't just about moving people and cars, it's also about moving bits and bytes and information. It's also about new multimodal forms of transportation. One of our proposals is Front Range Rail, Pueblo to Fort Collins. So while we talk about Tabor reform, which I certainly support, let's make sure we can also build a coalition today with the business community, Republicans and Democrats and independents, to get the resources we need to keep our state competitive and growing.
And Donna?
Thank you so much. Sometimes when you're the person who actually answers questions directly and stays within the time limit, you get penalized. So thanks for giving me an extra minute to answer that question. So I know this budget pretty well. I've been working on it for the last more than 2 years. And, how we measure and perform in the state is tied exactly to our budget. We have to address a couple of things. We will hit the Tabor cap probably 2 years from now. And we're going to have to refund money, and I will work to repeal that refund mechanism. That's important. But you raise an important question. What are the choices, and how are we going to make them? Because depending on which group you talk to, we've underinvested in higher ed, we've underinvested in K through 12, we've underinvested in transportation. I do think we have a solid transportation initiative on the ballot right now, as well as a general fund increase. And I am proposing a $100 million increase in child care credits that will deal with some of our most needy before we take on the hard work, I think, in 2020 to get a strong education initiative passed.
Thank you all. We are going to take a break, as promised, a 3.5-minute break. We will continue on Denver7. And please, for those of you watching, please send in your questions on Facebook. We will allow the candidates to take a break here and be right back.
How old are your kids, Mike?
10 and 6.
10 and 6.
So twins, 10, then little girl 6.
Yeah, so same age as our son.
Yeah.
6 also.
They met once, I think, at the maybe Boulder Pride. I might have like you last year.
Could have been, yeah.
Do you have the 3-year-old's a girl?
3-year-old's a girl.
Okay, so you have the same gap almost. Is this our only commercial break?
Welcome back, everyone. We want to make sure that we are staying on task here, so we want to get to some yes or no questions for you pretty quickly. Yes or no, would you encourage the Attorney General to sue the federal government over the Trump administration's so-called gag rule on abortion? Jared? Yes?
Yes.
It's a yes from all four. Okay. Now, yes or no, do you support an Olympic bid that doesn't include taxpayer money? Does not include taxpayer money.
John, this is a question that lends itself to a whole lot of criteria.
And we'll get to
around what that bid would look like, and would it be good for the people of this state?
As long as there's no taxpayer money involved, do you support an Olympic bid?
Plus investment in housing and infrastructure.
You want a little
Still
extra?
other criteria, John.
I want a bonus.
That's
a
not the
bonus
only
on top.
criteria.
I'll say no, I don't think it's possible without taxpayer risk or taxpayer expenditures. So if they're not charging you up front, they're going to put taxpayers at risk to cover the deficit. So I'm going to say no.
So, yes or no, do you think voters should have final say on whether Colorado should submit an Olympic bid?
Yes.
Sure.
Very good. One more yes or no question. Nathan Dunlap is behind bars for one of the grisliest crimes in state history. He was sentenced to death. Governor Hickenlooper stayed his execution. Yes or no, do you agree with the governor's stance?
No.
No, and there's more to talk about with that, John.
I would repeal the death penalty.
I would repeal the death penalty. I don't think it's appropriate to talk about a particular case when none of us up here reviewed the facts of the case,
And I
except for perhaps
support
Lieutenant
repealing
Governor Lynne, maybe.
I answered no.
Yes.
Do you support
She's in a position to do that. She's in a
do you
position.
support repealing the death penalty?
Absolutely.
Very good. And now we'll go to a campaign finance question. We are seeing big money spent in this primary, and this could be the most expensive governor's race in history. We have a question for each of you on campaign finance. Mr. Polis is spending millions of his own money. Jared, do you have to be a millionaire to win the race for governor?
I sure hope not. You know, most of the people up here are probably millionaires. I know a couple of them have put their own money in. Others have out-of-state billionaires in support of them. But it's, you know what, we need campaign finance reform. I think people of this state are just frustrated that you either have to know billionaires or be a millionaire or talk to the special interests and get their money. I support public financing of campaigns. I support what Maine does as a model, matching donations for small donations to campaigns. I think we need to eliminate PACs and special interest donations altogether. And we also need transparency on the dark money, which has even entered this race to a certain extent. So we can do a lot better. But I think what the voters are focused on is hopefully seeing through the different money things that affect everybody up here, who has the best solutions for our state. Who can actually save you money on health care? We have a plan to do that at polisforcolorado.com. Who will make it their priority to make sure every kid can go to preschool and kindergarten? We have a plan to do that at polisforcolorado.com as well.
Donna, you're trailing your rivals in campaign fundraising. What do you tell someone who is not a millionaire who wants to run for office? Is it even possible?
I think this election's for sale. And I think that's a tragedy in America today, and I think it's true around the country. The most qualified candidate, which several newspapers have declared me as well as our governor, who said I would be a great governor, isn't necessarily the person raising the most money. It also has to do with the fact that I actually am working. And so the time that has to go into raising money, campaigning, is pretty onerous. So I actually would support limits on campaign contributions, both individual, as we have now in Colorado, as well as in aggregate. And quite frankly, I'm also not raising dark money or soft money or whatever we want to call it, because I do think that interest groups, and they can be individuals or organizations, want something back when they give you money of $1 million or more.
You say this election's for sale. Who's trying to buy it?
Oh, I think individuals are trying to buy it for themselves or for other causes, or for their furthering their careers. I don't have a plan like that. I'm here because I care about hardworking Coloradans. It's not about money.
Cary, do you believe Jared Polis is trying to buy this election?
He's sure spending an awful lot of money. Congressman Polis has spent more money in this race than all of the candidates combined spent in the last governor's race. This election, this campaign, is exactly what is wrong with campaign finance in this country. We've got somebody self-funding their campaign who's not subject to any limit, spending millions of dollars. We've got another candidate in this race who's getting million-dollar contributions from people from outside of Colorado. They don't live here, and they're giving million-dollar contributions in this race. I sure hope we never get to a place in this country where only millionaires and billionaires and people who are friends with millionaires and billionaires are able to win elected office.
Real quickly, what would you do about it? What policy changes would you put in place to prevent this from happening again?
Well, we need to see the entire campaign finance structure change. I would support publicly financed campaigns. There are some states that are making real progress in getting dark money out of elections and equalizing, leveling the playing field. What we want is for the voters of this state to get to know us, to hear our vision for the state and why we're the best person to lead this state in the years ahead and not get drowned out by all these out-of-state millionaire dollars and dark money in the race.
Mike, you've had many wealthy donors donate to support your campaign or other committees supporting your campaign, including former New York City Michael Bloomberg. What will you get from these billionaires if you win? What will they get from you, that is?
I want to come back to the earlier question of the other millionaires on the stage, because I'm not sure who that was, but I'm a school teacher and a school principal, so I think I wouldn't be getting those Wells Fargo notices if I were a millionaire at this stage. But so I think the question really is about, what are the coalitions that are set to be able to win this campaign, and what does it take to do that? I think the question is this election or is this an auction, right? Because right now what you have is, we're very proud of the fact we have more small donors than any candidate in the race, more Colorado donors under $50 than anybody in the race. And so, yeah, when we knew we were running against a self-funder that was going to spend $10 or $12 million of his own money, we had to work hard to support it. I'm very proud of the fact that Mayor Bloomberg supported me because he looked around the country and was looking for who a candidate was that was really courageous on guns and was willing to take on the NRA and win. I'm the only candidate in this race that's done that. And he came out and said that because in this moment, you're going to need real leadership from the states who are willing to fight on those things. That's not things that Jared has done. In fact, we've been on different sides of that question on guns. And so people know exactly what they're getting from me. There's going to be no change in what I stand for, but we do have the largest number of small donors, and I'm very proud of that.
A number of these billionaires donating to your campaign support more charter schools. Will they get more charter schools if you are elected?
That's not accurate, actually. A number of the supporters of mine are supporters for different reasons. Mayor Bloomberg because of guns, others because they support the resistance against Trump and want strong, courageous governors who can fight that effort. And so I've been very clear. I worked as a teacher and a school principal in district schools. I'm the only one on the stage who's been a teacher and a principal, who's sat in the office with kids whose parents are getting deported. And so I've said I'm going to fight for high-quality schools all across the state. I think charter schools ought to play by the same set of rules as district schools. But the real challenge we have to solve is how we actually get the resources we need for all schools in Colorado, because right now what we know is they are dramatically underfunded, and if we don't get those resources, parents don't care what type of school they send their kids to. They want to know that their kid's not one of 37 kids in the class, and that's the problem Colorado's got to solve, and that's the one I'm committed to solving.
Mr. Polis, I want to give you 30 seconds real quickly here. Will you agree to any cap on your own personal spending in this election?
You know, when I started this race, I wanted to spend the time hearing from actual Coloradans, not millionaires and billionaires. We've had over 200 free meet and greets in every corner of this state. And to me, that says a lot about how campaigns should be run. Candidates shouldn't be forced to either be wealthy or spend time with 10 millionaires at a Denver steakhouse every night trying to raise the funds they need to compete. That's why I know we can do better, both as a nation, where I've sponsored comprehensive campaign finance reform nationally to help get money out of politics. And yes, Colorado can lead the way.
All right, let's move on. Cary Kennedy.
Because I think the challenge is if you're going to advocate for campaign finance without yourself stopping funding your own campaign, that just means that you can buy in while no one else can raise any money. So I think that you ought to be able to...
Mike, look, if you didn't have all these out-of-state donors, I wouldn't have needed to put in my own money to keep up with you. So, you know, it's money begets money. You know, you got to compete to get your message out.
You don't have to compete. You put in $12 million of your own money.
What are you at, 8? I mean, you're at 7 or 8.
Then you want no one else to be able to raise money. If you want to lead that way, then you should lead by refusing to give yourself $11 million.
This is exactly what's hurting our democracy.
All right, let's move on. Cary Kennedy, you have refused to disavow the negative advertising run by the teachers union on your behalf. You can coordinate donors with the teachers committee, so why haven't you told your donors not to contribute to them anymore if you believe in a clean campaign?
And I think we're all disappointed by the amount of negative ads in this race. Congressman Polis is spending tens of millions of dollars attacking me up on the airwaves. When that contrast ad came out that wasn't put out by my campaign, it was put out by an outside group, I condemned the negative tactics publicly. I publicly called for those groups to stay positive, and the ad has come down. But it's also important to realize that the reason the teachers ran that ad is because Congressman Polis has been trying to fool voters about his record supporting vouchers. And they needed to put out an ad to clear that issue up. It is clear, Congressman Polis, we know you don't support vouchers at the federal level. You voted against it in Congress your entire career, but you wrote an editorial supporting state legislation that supports using public taxpayer money to send kids to private school, and you stood on stage next to me 2 weeks ago defending districts' right to use vouchers. So the teachers had a legitimate issue to bring up in this race, and we need to defend their right to bring it up. I did condemn their tactics.
Let me be clear. Again, more of these false, misleading attacks from Cary Kennedy. I oppose vouchers at the federal level, state level, and the local level. I supported the recall of a pro-voucher Jeffco board. I supported anti-voucher candidates all over our state. As governor, people of Colorado will know that I will oppose diverting the resources we need in our public schools into private schools. I always have, and I always will. Cary Kennedy was the lobbyist for the organization that was pushing vouchers in the early 2000s. Now maybe she's had a change of heart and opposes vouchers and will join me in preventing the privatization of our public schools.
So I think this is what's wrong with democracy, which is people make promises and then they don't keep them, which is all four of us on this stage made a promise to run clean campaigns. And then Cary and Jared, when the race got serious, they caved on those promises, and they either ran negative ads or allowed negative ads to be run, and you did not. Cary called for it to be brought down when I asked you on the stage 3 weeks ago. And so what happens is people look at this and say, if I can't trust you to keep this promise, what other promises am I going to trust you to keep? But I think this is a clear issue where leadership is about having the courage to do what's right even when it's hard, which is I got attacked by those ads too. And I could have run my own negative attack ad and I didn't, because I made that promise and I plan to keep it. I think that's what folks are looking for most in their government.
Let's insert a quick yes or no question here. How many of you believe you and your supporters have run a clean campaign?
Oh, supporters?
And Donna Lynne, let's let you have a say on this, Donna Lynne.
Thank you. So, you know, this is the second, maybe the third time we've gone through this. And I think this is a differentiating conversation about why I'm running for governor, okay? Because I'm not a professional politician. I'm a workhorse and not a show horse. I have the experience. I'm a fighter, but I fight clean. And I fight for hard-working Coloradans. I've done this my whole life, whether I'm fighting here or in other places. This doesn't belong here, and I would stipulate that everybody to this side is running some degree of not a clean campaign. I won't say dirty. And I think that's not what we want. We want a statesman or stateswoman, because look what we're experiencing in Washington, D.C. with our president. Turn the other cheek, move on with the business that you have to do.
But let me just ask you very quickly, you are also trailing the others in fundraising. So what do you do? What do you tell someone who's not a millionaire, for example, and wants to run for office? Is it possible?
I would say it's hard. I would say to anybody who's considering this, it's probably one of the hardest things I've ever done, and I've raised 3 kids on my own, climbed all the 14ers. This is a tough thing. But if you believe in what you stand for, you stick with it. Because at the end of the day, the decision on this race is made sometime late in the night on June 26th, and we've still got a lot of undecided voters who I suspect aren't liking some of the things they're seeing on this stage.
Thank you.
Let's move on to a different topic. All of you have said that teachers in our state need to be making more money. Statewide, the average teacher's salary is about $52,000. What do you believe teachers should be making? What should the average teacher's salary be in Colorado? Mike, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think what matters here and in all questions is both what your plan is and how you actually intend to get it done. I think I'm the only one that's come out with a clear answer to this. So I do think that teachers are underpaid right now, and I do think we're going to have to pay them more to be able to retain and keep talent. And I think we have to start by being able to be competitive with other states that surround us. What we know right now is we're losing teachers to other states where $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 per year makes a huge difference. And we know we're losing teachers dramatically in rural areas of the state. So we have to provide additional incentives. So what I would do is, with this Tabor reform, put $100 million into teacher pay. That would have to be a state-level stipend because we don't control local school districts' teacher salaries. And in addition, I would provide incentives, both loan forgiveness and mortgage assistance to teachers that we could encourage to go to the hardest parts of the state where we can't fill those needs. That includes rural communities, that includes urban schools that have high degree of need. So I think what I would focus on is both making that investment from the state level to encourage and support all teachers, and also particularly targeting those districts where it's the hardest right now to attract and keep teachers, unless, as they say, you marry them to a farmer. That's often the best strategy.
But what do you believe should be the teacher salary?
So I think we have to keep up with the states that are immediately around us. My proposal would add $2,000 to each teacher's salary in year one, and then as the economy grows over time, we could keep up with that. I don't think there's a single number we have to target. What we have to do is make sure we can keep competitive with other states that are trying to lure our teachers away, and that will be a first down payment on what will have to be a salary that grows over time.
Thank you.
Jared, what's a livable wage for a teacher in Colorado?
You know, it's not just about the average wage, it's also about the starting wage, and it's also about disparities. I'll give you the example of a district I've been honored to represent, Loveland area, Thompson School District. Starting salary in Thompson School District for a teacher, about $32,500, $33,000. They're bordered by St. Vrain on the south, Poudre in the north, both around $38,000, $39,000 starting salary, all within about a 15-minute commute. So we have these enormous disparities in our state, in addition to the overall lack of pay. How do we attract teachers to serve in our underserved rural areas? We have a plan for loan forgiveness at polisforcolorado.com to provide an additional incentive for teachers to be able to teach in some of our most underserved areas. Now, over 70% of the resources that the state gives school districts reaches the classroom through smaller class size, through teacher pay. We all know the governor doesn't set the pay scale for teachers, districts do. But the more money that we're able to get from the state, and it'll be my priority to get the state legislature to increase education funding, most of that will reach teachers, and I'm not afraid to tie in those additional funds to teacher pay and to reduce class size.
How much will teachers make under your plan? How much of a raise will they get?
Well, again, teacher salaries are set by school districts, not by the governor. I'm not afraid to tie additional funding to teacher pay to make sure it doesn't get eaten up by middlemen or administrators along the way. I want to make sure it reaches the classroom. We also need to address the equalization to make sure that districts are able to attract the teachers they need and retain them, and they don't lose them to higher cost districts nearby.
Thank you.
So no specific number for salary?
Every district sets their own.
But what do you think is a
the more we're able to give the districts from the state, the better they'll be able to pay teachers. The DPS starting teacher salary is what, 41. Again, we look at the long-term salary as well. We need to be more competitive and pay teachers better to attract and retain the very best teachers for our kids. Because the most important thing for any kid in the classroom is their classroom teacher.
Thank you.
I'm going to be direct again. I think the important question is not average, it is starting. And so I would support a minimum starting salary of $35,000 for every teacher. Now, there are some districts that are already higher than that, partly because of the cost of living and partly because of their ability to increase their property taxes. But there's no question that a $35,000 a year salary for somebody who comes out with a bachelor's degree and sometimes additional teaching credits is in order. The second thing that I would support is a differential for teachers in rural school districts. In this year's budget, with the collaboration with the legislature, we did put more money into rural school districts. But interestingly enough, teachers often say, it's not my salary, it's about some of the other things that impact me. Those can be working conditions, that can be teacher development, it can be the conversations we had before about mental health and other support in the classroom. So we not only need to invest in a higher starting salary for teachers, but we also have to invest in their own development and their sense of wanting to stay as teachers for a whole career.
Thank you. Cary, you have the teacher support. Will you make us the #1 state in the nation for teacher pay?
I'd like to make it the #1 state in the nation for teachers. And yes, that includes raising their pay. We need to pay teachers a professional wage. We need to pay them a wage that allows them to support their families on a professional salary so they can support their own children. It's shameful that we're far below the national average. We have school districts in this state that average teacher pay is only around $30,000 a year. That's for people who've been teaching for a decade, who have master's degrees. That's not a professional salary that supports them. So we need to raise teacher pay at least to the national average. That is about $8,000 more a year on average. But I think we need to be above the national average. And the way we recruit top talent into the classrooms in our state to give our kids the skills and tools to compete in this economy that we're building here is to recruit top teachers and to support top teachers here in our state. I met with a teacher down in Durango who is looking at driving over the border to New Mexico because the school there is going to offer her $20,000 more a year for the exact same job. And you know what? In tears, she told me she's so committed to her kids in her school, she doesn't want to leave, but she's torn because she wants to give her own kids opportunities.
Thank you.
They should never be forced to make that choice.
Thank you. Now, I have to tell you that we have to end this debate on Denver7 a minute early because there is severe weather in Colorado right now. Mike Nelson will be coming up on Denver7 here in just a moment. We are taking this debate to Facebook Live. We hope you'll join us there after this brief break. We'll be back on Denver7 at 6 p.m. tomorrow night with the Republican candidates.
I'm Mike Nelson with the First Alert Action Day update. A very severe hailstorm currently going on across north central Colorado. We've had reports of golf ball size hail right along I-25 and Highway 85 from these cells. They're all severe storm warned at the present time until 7 o'clock, likely to be extended beyond that. So if you're in the vicinity between Berthoud and Brighton down to Evans, extending up to around Greeley, talking Firestone, Dacono, Frederick, any of these areas, if you're in advance of that storm, you can safely get outside to get your vehicles into a safe spot. There's large hail with all of these cells. In addition, a severe thunderstorm watch has been issued for all of north central Colorado, including the Denver metro area. That's until midnight. We see additional development likely farther to the south and west. I want to show you just a few different views. That's our camera out at DIA looking up at that intense cell. This is the view from Westminster. This is what it looks like in Alt. And this is the view currently from Fort Morgan. Stay with Denver7. We'll keep you up to date on this intense storm.
Me? Hi. Is your title on the screen?
Denver Post columnist.
Denver Post columnist.
Beekeeper.
And beekeeper.
Queen of the world. Queen of the world.
What's a beekeeper called?
Apiarist.
Apiarist.
Or apiist.
How many times?
I give them 30 seconds
To answer which one?
to follow up on the rural-urban divide, yes, no? So then let's give them 30 seconds, and then Lori.
45 seconds, everyone.
Then Lori, then your minority question? Yeah. Does that work? So wage, so this is yes or no. Yes, no. Yes, no. Follow. Lori, minority. And if we have time, we can come.
Welcome back, everyone. We are continuing the conversation on the denverchannel.com and Facebook Live. So thank you for sticking with us as we continue our conversation with the 4 Democratic members here.
And we'll start with you, Donna. We'll do a series of 3 yes or no questions. A town in California has offered a guaranteed income, a guaranteed wage of $500 to low-income residents. Would you support such a plan here in Colorado, yes or no?
No, I think we've already got the mechanism of an earned income tax credit here in Colorado that I think addresses those needs.
Cary?
I would guarantee a basic social safety net. I don't know that I'd call it a guaranteed income.
No, I would guarantee access to the skills people need for the jobs that would pay a family wage rather than focusing on the income.
And finally, Jared.
Jared?
Look, I'm certainly excited by this concept that people are talking about of universal basic income. I think we need to see some of the models that are being tested work before we would have the confidence to say we need to bring this to Colorado.
Yes or no, do you support spending state money to explore the creation of a Hyperloop transit system in Colorado? Cary?
Explore it? Yes.
Do you support spending state money to explore it?
I'd have to take a closer look at that proposal. I know that's a very far future technology, and I would have to see whether the investment is worth it. I do believe we need to invest in new and modern technologies to upgrade our transportation network so that we're not all spending so much time in traffic.
Thank you. Mike?
Yes, I would support it. I think that we're not going to be able to pave our way out of this problem by keep adding lanes on I-25 and I-70, so I think this is worth investigation.
Jared?
My proposal's for high-speed front-range rail. That means conventional, 70, 80 miles an hour. We can do that today. Of course, I would be excited if a new technology could revolutionize transportation, reduce our carbon emissions, and get people where they're going quicker and from less cost.
Yes, I would support spending state money to explore this and also to dream big about other ways that we can make our transportation problems less challenging and to integrate it into an overall economic development strategy.
For this next question, we'll take a yes or no answer and allow you 30 seconds after we have all those answers to follow up. So I want you to know that. But tell me, yes or no, do you believe rural Colorado is forgotten?
Yes.
It won't be when I'm governor.
No.
Cary?
Yeah, I do. I'm concerned that we've got 2 Colorados.
And Mike, on this issue of the urban-rural divide, how do you fix it? How do you solve it? How do you stitch Colorado back together?
I think this is one of the things that matters. I grew up on the western slope of Colorado, so I have family all across the western slope, and they do feel like they are not seen and not always heard. And this is why, when I was a senator, I fought to pass Jumpstart, which was a proposal targeted at economic development just in rural parts of the state. Already it's had great success in Grand Junction. We've started about 11 or 12 new businesses, more than 200 jobs created. So I think it is about listening, and it is about showing up, and it is about making sure we know that everything is not Denver and Boulder. And that means people need different supports and different resources. That means things like broadband access, like skills training, and yes, incentives to attract businesses to grow and to stay in rural Colorado.
Jared?
Look, I'm excited that part of our infrastructure package is high-speed broadband and internet connectivity. We need to make sure we empower telecommuting, startup infrastructure in all areas of the state. It's exciting to see startup accelerators, co-working space in Montrose, Grand Junction. We also need to talk about how renewable energy, and our plan is to get our whole state to 100% renewable energy, can be a great source of jobs in rural Colorado. In the Eastern Plains, the renewable energy corridor of Colorado, having solar or wind on your property for farmers means extra income. Might means there's a job in town for your kid or grandkid in deploying or maintaining solar and wind energy to help power Colorado.
Thank you. Donna?
Your timer's not working, FYI.
Thank you.
So the reason why I said no is because of a lot of the work that I think the Hickenlooper administration done, and I've personally done over the last 2+ years, and that is traveling to all 64 counties. I've been to some counties 22 times. I spend almost all of my time outside of the Front Range. When the governor gave his State of the State address, rural was used 27 times, and I think you've seen a platform evolve of investment in rural communities. We just invested $100 million in broadband. We are working on rural health care issues. I love rural Colorado. It has a lot to do with why I'm running to be governor, is to change many of the perceptions and some of the realities in rural Colorado that we talked about before, like education.
Thank you. Cary?
And when I served as state treasurer, I developed a program that's invested over $1 billion in rural Colorado, helping small communities build modern schools, replace their aging facilities, so that their kids can get the same high-quality education we have here on the Front Range. We have to make sure we're making the capital investment in rural Colorado. Front Range. It means making sure we have broadband available in communities throughout this state, and investing in things like placemaking and developing cultural arts and developing the outdoor recreation economy so that those communities can diversify, attract tourism, and see the kind of prosperity that we're seeing here on the Front Range.
Thank you. We have a question from a Facebook viewer, and this is Lori, who asks or says, pot users have the right to smoke on their private property. What rights do I have as a non-smoker when the smell of my neighbor's pot infiltrates my home and makes my belongings stink to high heaven? Jared?
Well, I think it's the same question as you have with if your neighbor is smoking a tobacco product too. So I mean, I think either way, there could be a nuisance effect if it's jeopardizing your health. I think that we need to put health and safety first for all Coloradans. So I mean, whatever you might be choosing to smoke, if it's affecting you and yourself and it's your own business, if it's affecting your neighbor, I think it's legitimate that the local authorities could try to figure that out in a way where you're not harming your neighbor.
Donna?
Yeah, and I think you've seen a number of actions that really relate to the state's concern and my concern as a public health professional to make sure that public safety and health, and whether it's tobacco smoking or marijuana smoking, is addressed through education, through what our Department of Public Health and the Environment does. And I agree, we've got to make sure that we look at the long-range impacts of smoking. I mean, we had a conversation in America around secondhand smoke that we didn't talk about 20 or 30 years ago, and we would sit on airplanes and everybody would smoke. So I think we've really got to focus on the importance of this as a health issue.
Cary?
So odors from marijuana, like odors from other products, we do have ordinances that protect against what your viewer is concerned about. They can call the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. They'll come out and test that and those odors. And we need to make sure that as we move forward as a state with recreational marijuana, that we are respecting private property rights and that those ordinances are being enforced.
I think that this is one of the many questions people have around the state, which is many people that supported the legalization of marijuana or were concerned are now wanting to make sure we balance this appropriately. And so I think one of the things is pirate incursion on your own ability to not have things that smell in your house, and I think that's a fair question, in the same way it is with other nuisances. But I do think the other one is people want to know that we're going to, as governor, find the right balance between allowing this industry to be protected and to grow, and also making sure that it's responsible. So I was the chair of the Senate Finance Committee and had direct oversight over the marijuana industry, and so we worked really hard to solve some of the things I think we weren't prepared for early on, like around edibles. The fact that we didn't have standard dosaging, so you wouldn't know know if there was 5 milligrams of THC or 100 in an edible, or that you had gummy bears or Twizzlers that were attractive to kids. Those are changes we've made with the support of the industry that I think also wants to see people be safe and be able to live in their home without that kind of intrusion. So I think the industry would be a good partner here to be able to say common sense steps that we've solved for tobacco, we could also solve for marijuana.
Thank you.
We'll move to another topic. Oil and gas drilling is big business in parts of rural Colorado, but there is tension between the drilling companies and homeowners. Do you think the mandatory setbacks currently in law are adequate to keep wells away from homes? And what do you consider a safe distance? Donna, we'll start with you.
Well, as you know, our current setback law is 500 feet. I'm open to a conversation about expanding that. I do think the 2,500-foot setback is not something that most people support. What we do care about is that public safety and health is our #1 priority when it comes to where gas drilling occurs. Now, actually, in a lot of rural Colorado, they are very welcome to gas and oil drilling because, in fact, some of it occurs on their property. The biggest challenge is more in the Front Range, where we have that clash between home development and housing development and where the oil drills are located. But I would, as governor, strengthen the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission by making it a full-time paid group that actually spends the time without interference from their existing relationships to focus on this setback law in concert with our public health officials.
Where between 500 and 2,500 do you think is appropriate?
Well, I think it's arbitrary, quite frankly. I mean, 799 could be my answer, but I do think we've got to rely on professionals. I think it's an arbitrary number. We have to be concerned about noise. We have to be concerned about schools and some of the issues around location near a playground versus the actual school building. But my point is, there are professionals that can look at what's happened in other states, the impact on the economy, and the health data to make the decisions on whether 500 or 1,000 or 1,500 are the right number.
Cary, do you have an answer for this question?
John, I don't believe the current setbacks in law are adequate. I recently visited the Bella Romero School, where there's a huge drilling operation. There's going to be 20 and possibly even more wells that are just a couple hundred feet off the kids' soccer field at the school. Not even 1,000 feet from the playground. And when you're standing on that playground, that is a huge industrial operation that is taking place right adjacent to where those children are playing. Now, that community spent a lot of time trying to get that operation moved just a little bit farther away. We have the technology today with this industry to be able to move those wells farther from places like schools and public parks and playgrounds. So I support giving our local jurisdictions the authority to make those setbacks longer than they are currently in law.
But you do currently oppose the 2,500 setback proposed for the ballot.
I don't think we should have the same setback requirement for every single building in the entire state. What's going on in the San Juan Basin is entirely different than what's going on up here on the Front Range. I think we should give local communities, they are best suited to deal with these difficult land use decisions, and we should give them that authority.
Thank you. Mike, are the current setbacks adequate?
No, I would push back the current setbacks. I had a dinner with some families up in Firestone a few months ago, and they are neighbors to the 2 gentlemen who had a pilot light in their basement they had to fix, and went down into that basement to fix the pilot light, and their home exploded, and they were both killed. And I can tell you those neighbors are terrified that there might be other abandoned wells in their neighborhood that might be underneath their homes. They can't sell their homes because no one wants to buy them. They're worried about local schools. And that fear is only going to grow as there's more and more development across the Front Range. So I think this is a real challenge we're going to have to solve. And there are 3 things I would do as governor. One is, yes, I do believe we have to push back setbacks. Second is we have to make sure that we actually fix all of those abandoned wells around the state, 300, 400, 500 of them, that could be leaking gas into someone's home or into someone's school. And so I think we have to resolve those. And then third is we have to get to zero leakage along all those pipelines so we're not putting people at more risk across the state. I think those are common sense steps, but I do think we need one set of statewide rules so you don't have every local city council and county commissioner having oil and gas companies come and negotiate them against each other for the best deal. I think there ought to be one set of statewide rules to protect all families and all schools, and that's what I would do as governor.
And how far away should those setbacks be then?
So I think 500 is not far enough. I agree that 2,500 is too far. I do think that you're going to have to require negotiations with stakeholders on both sides, because I think Donna's right on this. The question is, it's going to have to vary based on what the current infrastructure is. We know if you went to 2,500 right now, you would actually almost eliminate every single oil and gas rig in the state in terms of the current setbacks. You'd have to look at what's currently grandfathered in and what new drills can be put at greater distance. But I think for all the new developments, technology is going to allow us to be much farther away, and we got to set a higher standard.
Jared, 4 years ago, you financially supported an effort that put forward a number of different distances for setbacks, including 2,500 feet. What do you think is the appropriate setback, and is the current one adequate?
I think 500 feet is not enough. In addition, and I've been to Bella Romero Academy in Greeley, you need to measure any offset from any part of the school grounds where the kids have their educational program, not just from the school building. Under current law, it can actually be literally right next to a field where kids have PE. It needs to be further away. You're right. I've supported 1,500, 2,000 feet in cases where there's not a surface use agreement in place. Surface use agreements starting under Bill Ritter have been a best practice in terms of actually entering a contract with the landowner regarding where the oil and gas operation is sited. We need additional setbacks statewide, and we should be guided by science. Health and safety first. Objective data should guide our way, and it depends on what's being done where. And it's important to talk about the rights of homeowners and landowners as well, but we should not sacrifice putting any Coloradans at risk because of oil and gas activity that's too close to their home.
When you visited Bella Romero, you drew criticism from environmentalists who wanted the 2,500-foot setback. So what can you tell them? Where would it be? What is the appropriate distance?
Again, certainly more than 500 feet. When there's not a surface use agreement, I've supported up to 2,000 feet setbacks. I think that we can do this in our state. It'll be the challenge of the next governor to help make sure that we have the local control framework in place to give our communities a seat at the table, and to make sure that setbacks statewide are enough to objectively and from a scientific perspective protect our health and safety.
In 2,000, it sounds like? That's what you feel like is appropriate?
In a case where there's no surface use agreement, I think that there should be greater setbacks. Yes, it could be. I've supported 1,500 and 2,000 in the past. I certainly haven't changed my opinion on that.
Okay, thank you all. Most minorities have traditionally voted Democratic, so what can you promise to the people of color about nullifying the wage gap and other discriminatory practices that have historically affected our minority communities the most? Cary, we'll start with you.
I'm glad you brought that up, Ann. The wage gap between minority communities and their white counterparts is entirely unacceptable. In fact, it's grown in the last couple decades. So we need to make sure that policies that are holding these communities back from being able to advance economically, that we're addressing those at the state. First and foremost is making sure that we have a minimum wage in this state that families can support themselves on. I support giving local jurisdictions here in Colorado the authority to raise the minimum wage. The state minimum wage should be a floor. Local jurisdictions should be able to tackle that. We also need to look at enforcing our current labor laws. There are a lot of vulnerable communities that are being exploited, and we need to make sure that the protections that are in law today that are guarding against the exploitation of workers are being enforced. We can do more to implement family-friendly work policies like paid leave, so that when parents bring home a child, when they're caring for a sick relative, they don't get fired for meeting their obligations at home. They're able to support, continue their income.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you. So I'm very proud of the fact that I represented the historically African-American Senate District for the last 7 years. I was the first legislator to open a community office up in North Park Hill in the Holly, in the middle of one of these neighborhoods that is affected by struggles with economic opportunity that is fair. And so I've had an office where over the last 8 years, anytime someone's trying to find a job and can't find it, they walk in my front door and they tell me what the challenges are and what they can't find. And I think what we're going to have to do is a couple of things. One is we have to make sure we invest in getting everyone the skills they need for the jobs that are coming. Right now, we know a lot of low-income families and a lot of families of color don't have access to the training they need that are going to get the jobs and pay middle-class wages. That's why my Colorado Promise would make that available to everybody. It also means I'm very proud of the fact that I'm a fluent Spanish speaker. I hosted the first all Spanish language town hall so that our constituents who speak Spanish can have a governor who can listen to them in their own native language. I think that matters in this moment. And also to make sure we reform our criminal justice system. What we know is so many of our communities of color are disproportionately hit by a criminal justice system that right now criminalizes poverty and criminalizes mental health and criminalizes drug addiction. I would reverse all of those with my criminal justice platform, which also makes sure people have both economic opportunity and are not stuck in a system that's keeping them out of a job and out of their home.
Thank you. Jared?
Yo puedo hablar español también, Miguel. I also speak Spanish, Michael. You know what? I believe in the power of giving workers a seat at the table. Certainly I'm supportive of the ability to organize and organize labor. Employee ownership is another model. I kicked off my campaign in Colorado Springs at Save-A-Lot grocery store. It's 100% employee-owned. A majority of their employees are minorities. So building wealth along with earning an hourly wage, allowing local communities to set a minimum wage above the state minimum wage, also addressing the long tail of racial inequities in pay, salary histories, making sure we have job equity in the public sector, including teaching and the police force. And it's completely inexcusable that in this day and age, women earn 74 cents on the dollar compared to men. The very first constitutional amendment I sponsored when I got to Washington as a member of Congress was the Equal Rights Amendment. It's about time nationally, it's about time here in Colorado to end pay disparities based on gender and based on race.
Thank you.
Well,
Donna?
as a woman who's experienced some of this pay discrimination, I can tell you I'm very committed to solving this problem. And I think the state and the governor can actually play a pretty significant role in being a crusader and making sure that we don't have wage disparities within our own state workforce of 31,000. The second thing I think the state can do, and I'm prepared to do this, is to actually take a look at how the state spends its money in communities, because the state gives money through contracts to a lot of vendors. And having a policy that not only counts how we do that, but encourages small businesses that are owned by women and minorities is a standard practice in most large cities in the country, as well as in many states, and I would implement that. And I think the most important thing that we have to do is we have to invest in education, because some of that wage gap is based on a skills gap. And I spoke about it before, which is that equity gap in education that we have in graduation rates, whether it's K through 12 or it's higher education.
And we'll take another question from Facebook here, and Mike, you'll go first on this one. Pete wants to know how you will pay for your health care plan. All of you support expanded Medicaid. All of you want to expand coverage even further. How do you pay for it?
Thank you for the question. So a couple minutes or a couple seconds about what I think is important here. One is we know that we've expanded access to health care. We have not dropped costs for health care. So we have on the Western Slope and the Eastern Plains some of the most expensive health care regions in the country. That's why I've supported offering a public option to allow people to buy in to Medicaid to be able to get access to care, and to insist on price transparency so we would know how much your services cost before you go in, so you're not surprised when you get the bill 2 months later. And I think one of the ways that I proposed paying for this is I think that it's an appropriate time to raise the tobacco tax, which is one of the things that we know drives long-term health costs more than anything right now is tobacco usage. And we know that there are price-sensitive consumers where if they if you start buying cigarettes when you're 18 or 19, you don't have a lot of spare income. We can deter people from starting the use of tobacco, at the same time create a revenue source that will allow us to invest in healthcare. The benefit of my plan is that the more people can buy into a public option, the more stable the system becomes. So it does not require subsidies, but it does allow us to fund things like expanding CHIP, which I propose, so that every child in Colorado would be covered by insurance, and I'm the first one to propose to expand that.
Real quickly, 2 years ago, voters rejected a tobacco tax. So what would you do to fill that gap if they don't support it again?
Yeah, well, I think this is why you have to make the case to the voters about why healthcare costs matter and why we want to bring them down. I think if we were able to go to voters and talk about what we could do to actually drive down costs, I don't think we effectively made that case last time. And what I think what people are seeing around the state is that this is one of the biggest problems we're seeing for businesses, for homes, for families. And so if we could connect why an investment in stopping the use of tobacco and expanding investment in healthcare would mean better coverage and cheaper coverage, I think that's something everyone in Colorado wants.
Jared, you support Medicare for all. Your plan is similar to one rejected just 2 years ago because of its $10 billion $10 billion price tag. How's your plan any different, and wouldn't it go down on the ballot again as well?
You know what? You got to get the details right, and you need to show that you save money. I was proud to work with President Obama to pass the Affordable Care Act, covering 20 million more people. I was proud to successfully stand up against Donald Trump's efforts to gut the Affordable Care Act in Congress. But our work isn't done. Colorado, as a forward-looking state, should be one of the very first states to not only achieve universal health care, but save people money. It's absolutely inexcusable that Americans pay 5-8 times as much for the same prescription drug as Canada, as Germany. You know, this was brought home to me with a student at New America School who I got to know named Kimberly. Kimberly, like a lot of students at New America School, didn't have insurance, and she was a diabetic. She wasn't able to access preventative and ongoing treatment for her diabetes, and she needed a kidney transplant. The cost, many times more, a lot harder on her life as well through the weight of finding a donor and the years of dialysis. Every other industrialized country has some form of universal health care, and they pay less. Americans are getting ripped off, and as governor, I won't give up until we stop it.
Amendment 69 had that $10 billion price tag on the ballot. How much would yours have?
The details matter. So again, Amendment 69, we need to go back to the drawing board and work with the business community, Republicans and Democrats, to come up with a model that is good for business, good for startups, and works and actually saves people money. I have no doubt in my mind that the voters of this state will approve a measure if we can demonstrate that it saves them money on health care without sacrificing quality, and it will.
Thank you. Donna?
I think being clear really matters when we talk about health care. First of all, universal coverage means everybody has coverage in Colorado. It is not a single-payer system. And one of the things that I've learned in my career in health care is I've been a patient, like all of us. I've been a purchaser of health care as an employer, a provider, and a payer. And it's really hard. And we can't just say, let's have a slogan and let's get something done. I think the first step is a really, really simple one. We have 200,000 people in Colorado right now who are eligible for Medicaid. They're not signed up. And guess what? For many of them, the federal government pays 90% of the cost. So it will only cost the state 10%. One of the first things I'm going to do when I'm the governor is to hire the people that can go out and sign up those people. The second thing is the state employees, and I've managed this program here in Colorado and in other states. That is a vehicle by which we can use our purchasing power and clout to bring more people into the system and make sure that we are providing for small school districts, for municipalities, and for small businesses a way to buy health care in a bundle. It's cheaper, it's smarter, and it's easy. We don't have to wait for Donald Trump to be out of office. That's the only way we're going to get a single-payer system because it is a national conversation.
The state Medicaid rolls are burgeoning, and so is the cost. Can you expand Medicaid to these 200,000 extra people without increasing the cost?
Yes, so my proposal is not to expand Medicaid for the majority of people. As I said, we have 200,000 people that can come in. Many of them are healthier people. They've chosen to stay out, and as I said, 10%, that's a deal I'd take any time. 90% from the feds, 10% from us to do that.
That may change. We'll have to see. Cary, you support a public option for everyone in Colorado. How would you pay for that?
Yeah, I'm the only candidate on this stage calling to offer a public health insurance option for everyone here in Colorado. The problem, John, is that too many families in our state can't afford their health care. They're not able to cover the rising costs of premiums, the out-of-pocket costs, the pharmaceutical costs. We can offer a public health insurance plan in this state available to everyone for less, and we should pass those savings on to everyone. It's something that we can do right now here in our state, which is a real contrast to the proposal that Congressman Polis has made. His plan, which was rejected by nearly 80% of the people in this state, would require the approval of President Trump and Congress. I don't think we can wait. I hear too often from families who cannot afford their health care today. We can offer a public health insurance option and make health care accessible and affordable to everyone here in our state.
If I can mention, since I was mentioned in the response, I think
quickly, please,
should not use Donald Trump's presidency as an excuse not to take action in Colorado. I believe that health care will go national someday. I've supported Medicare for All since I've been elected to Congress 10 years ago. But we can't afford to wait. Colorado should be among the first 5 or 10 states to implement a universal health care model that saves people money, and then we will take it nationally.
Very,
This plan requires us to wait.
okay, if you can answer very quickly. The Harvard Business Review recently found people who are more self-aware are more successful in executive roles. We want to know very quickly, if we were to sit down with your significant other, what would they say is your most annoying trait? Jared?
Work too hard and don't take enough time off.
How much time do you have?
Donna?
I am fastidious and orderly, and my husband is the exact opposite. He's creative and messy.
Cary?
I can't believe I'm going to say this on Facebook Live. I snore.
And Mike?
I generally like to always keep the kids up 1 hour later than they probably should.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you all for joining us tonight. This concludes our debate. We'd like to thank the candidates and our live audience here at the University of Denver. Now is when you can applaud.
All right, so right now, again, we want to thank you all for being here. We're going to toss it over to Shannon Ogden in the Denver7 studios right now for a panel discussion on tonight's debate featuring Denver Post guest columnist Krista Kafer and Blueprint Strategies Cinnamon Watson. So thank you all for your attention and for being here. Appreciate it.